with a Cincinnati Bengals mock draft. Now, so far this offseason, they've done a fantastic job addressing the number one priority that they've had, which is addressing the offensive line, bringing in people to protect, guess who? Broadway Joe Burrow. They did a great job bringing in, obviously, a tackle. They brought in a guard, and Alex Kappa, Lyle Collins. They've solidified that right side of that offensive line here for Joe Burrow. But in this latest mock draft as well, ProFootballNetwork.com, we do have them selecting as well. Round one, pick number 31 here, Tyler Linderbaum, center out of Iowa. Now, obviously, there were some of the reports coming out about him potentially falling down draft boards. If he does and he's there for Cincinnati, I tell you what, this is a power move right here for the Cincinnati Bengals.
Yeah, I mean, I tell you what, if you want to go above and beyond to improve your offensive line, I mean, at this point, the Bengals kind of have to do that, right? It's been an issue for such a long time. And now you got Joe Burrow, Joey B in the pocket in the backfield, and you have to protect him because you want him to be around for the long haul. So I think, you can never have too many offensive linemen. It does seem kind of like overkill, especially after getting Ted Karras in free agency as well, a guy who played pretty well for New England at the center position, a reliable veteran. But at the same time, injuries, he's getting older. If Linderbaum is there, I could reason, getting him and strengthening that interior. And Karras has some flexibility there as well, so move him around, maybe put Linderbaum at center. If you don't go there, there are some guard options that I really like. Kenyon Green could be available there as well. And if you want to upgrade the corner position, if Andrew Booth falls to that spot, I would love that for the Bengals as well. I think they have options after their free agency, kind of upgrading the offensive line, but you can never have too many offensive linemen. That's the mantra. You need to make sure that unit's set.
Nah, that makes a ton of sense. And honestly, like for me, the Bengals had been one of the biggest winners of all of free agency, just the way they attacked it. Like we all said, protect Joe Burrow at all costs. And they did that to further solidify and get my words out here. The offensive line just makes a ton of sense. One of the other questions we have on this team, which was, like I said, just in the Super Bowl not that long ago, it was a cornerback position. We saw Eli Apple kind of get burned a couple times here and there, which was very publicized on Twitter. Every time a wide receiver wanted to put a tweet out, Eli Apple kind of seemed to be the recipient. So in the second round, pick 63, you've got the Cincinnati Bengals also further addressing this. And this is with Martin Emerson, the cornerback out of Mississippi State. Given the questions on the Bengals, this is a guy got really good size, 6'2", about 200 pounds. This is someone who can kind of step in from day one and really help kind of solidify this passing defense for the Bengals.
Yeah, I think so. And I think the important thing is that the length that he provides is something that the Bengals haven't always had. Opposite Chidobe Awuzie. Obviously, Awuzie actually had a decent season last year, could be a long-term starter for them at the corner position. But you need someone dependable opposite him. And Eli Apple, I don't want to rag on the guy too much because Twitter already gave him quite a bit.
He deserves
They
it.
did enough.
You're like, I agree at the same time. Like, he's talented, don't get me wrong, but he's been, back and forth for a while. If you're the Bengals, you can't go into week one with him as your starter, I don't think. He's dependable depth for sure, but try and get a guy who can go on the boundary and start opposite Chidobe Awuzie. Martin Emerson is one of my guys. I'm very high on him. I really like the length. I think the closing speed is very good. He's very intelligent as well. He processes quickly, he can come downhill in an instant, and he's not a liability from a fluidity standpoint. A lot of times with taller cornerbacks, you look at that, they can't always shrink on those transitions and get in space smoothly. But Martin Emerson does a really good job of that. I think he improved his technique and matching ability in 2021. On top of that, he's physical and run support, has playmaking ability at the catch point. So I'm a big fan of what he has to offer, and especially for the Bengals, the one thing that they really need is length, is that disruption radius, and he has that. So I think looking at that, if you can get him in round two at the end of round two, that's a solid value add.
Well, and I think one thing, too, also to look at is tight end. I mean, obviously, the departure of C.J. Uzomah in free agency to the New York Jets. They did sign Hayden Hurst coming over from the Atlanta Falcons, but it's always great to have another guy. As we see in the NFL today, I mean, honestly, I feel like a lot of teams, especially teams that are built to run the football. Now, I think for the Bengals, they have balance. They're built to run and throw the ball with all the weapons that they have here, but you need another tight end. And I think that, obviously, for this pick here, round 3, pick 95, Jeremy Ruckert, tight end out of Ohio State. What type of fit do you think he might have here with Joey B and the Bengals?
Yeah, staying in Ohio, going to Cincinnati. I like the fit for sure. I think especially with Jeremy Ruckert, you're kind of banking on the upside, right? Because he was never a featured weapon for Ohio State. A lot of times he got drowned out by the sheer amount of wide receivers that they have. I mean, they have at least 5 NFL wide receivers at a given point, any given point in time. But Jeremy Ruckert, he kind of developed and kind of took up a role this year as an ancillary threat. He kind of grew into it And I think, I think he's a guy that's a candidate. You look at players who, have the potential to be better pros than they were in college. I think he's one of those players. I think you look at the traits that he has. He's one of the more athletic tight ends in this class. He's actually got pretty good twitch and hip sync. I think he's a pretty explosive athlete for his size. And then he's a very physical blocker. He's got the want to. That's one thing that you always look for. Do they have the want to? Are they really energetic going after defenders? He certainly is. And at the same time, athletic in space, can separate, and has ability at the catch point. He can contort, he can control his body, and he can reach beyond his frame for those passes. So I think we haven't seen what Jeremy Ruckert can do yet. And that makes this ad very exciting, because I think you put him in an increased role. There might be some lumps, some acclimation early on, but he can develop into a very good tight end, a very good weapon in the passing game, I think.
I would not be surprised. Like I said, we look back, we kind of talked about this yesterday when we hit on him with Khalil Shakir. There are some guys who I think when we look back on a couple years from now, we're going to wonder how they went so late. For me, Jeremy Ruckert is one of those guys. It's almost how we look back on Mark Andrews and we wonder how he went so low despite the production that he's had now, really just flourishing in the Baltimore Ravens passing offense. Ruckert's one of those guys just because he was kind of hidden, given the absolute incredible talent at Ohio State. They might have 5 first-round draft picks out of the wide receiver room. It's just because he wasn't shown so much. I would not be surprised if he's one of those guys we look back on and wonder, wow, he probably should have gone a little bit higher. Sticking with the Bengals right here in their 4th round draft pick 135. You've got them also adding some other additional depth to that offensive line, which has already made a lot of big moves. This is with Cade Mize, the guard out of Tennessee. Did play a little bit of right tackle. So is this more where you kind of just see he projects more towards being a guard in the NFL? Or do you think he kind of brings that help? Like, look, someone goes down, you've got someone who can kind of slide in at guard or go back maybe to the right tackle position as a fill on a need-be basis?
Yeah, I think at this point, if you're the Bengals, you're not really counting on getting a starter at this range.
Mhm.
So I think what you're looking for is that projected versatility, being able to play tackle or guard. Cade Mays, personally, I think he projects a little bit better on the interior, not an elite lateral athlete. He's really physical, can lose his balance sometimes in space. So I think you're looking at, a Mauler on the inside whose physicality and power does translate there. But I think for the Bengals right here, it's just solid depth, a guy who can fill in at multiple positions if he needs to. I'm not counting on him to do that. I'm hoping I don't have to do that too often, but having him in the wings, and hoping that he can develop and maybe become a dependable spot starter down the line. That's kind of what I'm counting on here. But, especially with those early to mid day 3 picks, the offensive line, you really need that depth and that security there. So this is kind of pointing toward that.
Take these broken wings. There we go. Outside of that,
I'm so glad I didn't cut that off and let you go with that.
When you brought that up, that's the first thing that popped into my head here. But let's take a look at rounds 5 through 7 here for the Cincinnati Bengals and the draft here. Joshua Williams, they obviously got him at the cornerback position out of Fayetteville State. You look at round 6, pick number 208, Thomas Booker, defensive tackle out of Stanford. So adding some more depth there, especially with the whole Larry Ogunjobi situation, BJ Hill. They need to address some of that defensive interior. And then you have them adding an offensive tackle, round 7, pick 224, Bamadele Olaseni out of Utah. And then they close things out with Brandon Sebastian, cornerback out of Boston College. And obviously for the Cincinnati Bengals, really addressing the offensive line was the top priority here this offseason. And with this mock draft here at Pro Football Network, they seem to do just that.
Yeah, for sure. And I love on day 3 too, Joshua Williams, Bamadele Olaseni. I think Olaseni has one of the longest wingspans recorded in combine history or pro day history, so he's a big dude and adding more size to that offensive line.